Today we're going to talk about innovating at a 101-year-old company, which Forbes Media is. I've also worked at Hearst Publishing, which is another 100-plus-year-old company. And we'll talk about a couple of things. I am Nina. I'm currently a director of product management at Forbes. And I've been in media for the past 13 years. I worked at Hearst Publishing. I worked on a joint venture with Verizon where we built products for Product Suite and Verizon under AOL, Yahoo, which formed The Oath, and Complex Media as well. And I studied entrepreneurial thought and thought leadership and action in grad school. And I'm a Boston native, so I've been in New York for 5 years, and I don't have any, turf wars with the Yankees or the Red Sox or anything like that. So I've fit in pretty well, and I love cooking and fitness and so all that, everything content too. So if you guys have any interest there, I'd love to chat about it. So today we're going to talk about what is innovation, what is innovation as a concept, and then what is innovation as it applies to product. We'll talk about a framework that I really like, Peter Drucker's 7 sources of innovation. I'll give some examples across industries and then some examples at Forbes of ways that I've impacted the company through innovation. And then some biggest roadblocks to innovation and tools to kind of combat and work through. Let's start with what is the concept of innovation. Like, what do you guys think it is? I think there's so many different types of definitions of innovation when you talk to different people in different industries, but it's really connected to what you guys said is kind of like, I think of innovation as just listening and observing, the process of listening and observing, and then trying to do something different. And then the ultimate goal is really to make life better, life easier for either your company or the end user. And so all of that is kind of the idea of innovation. And oftentimes we hear innovation and entrepreneurship go hand in hand, because it is that idea of like bringing something new to the table, creating some new change, in your environment. Innovation is both a process and an outcome. So it's not just the end result, the tangible product at the end of the road. It's how you get from A to B. And the process can be innovative as well. And process is actually a source of innovation that you can tap into. So Steve Jobs, he's one of the great innovators that we think of when we think of product innovation. And he said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And in my job as a product director, I have to make decisions every day about what products we should work on, where we should allocate resources, where we should put our time and energy into. And I basically have to support why I think that. So there's a number of projects that are happening and I have to say, no, let's do this one over that one. So it helps to have a framework to support why I think that. And oftentimes when you do that, you might be the only voice in the room saying, no, we should work on developing this feature instead of worrying about tech debt. And sometimes you're the only voice in the room and it might be lonely, but you are passionate about it. And so that's what makes you a leader and not a follower when you're talking about innovating. So this is Peter Drucker's 7 sources of innovation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Peter Drucker is kind of a thought leader in innovation. He's kind of ahead of his time. He started in the 1980s writing a lot of books, and he wrote a book called Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And in that book, he kind of came up with a framework for finding sources of innovation. And so there are 7 sources. The top 4 are sources of innovation that happen internally. So that's within your company, with your users, with your customers, with your managers. It's first-party data that you have. It's connecting. It's something that you can touch and you know for sure. And that's why it has a high reliability of success. So the unexpected. This is if you are working on a product and you're building a feature and it completely fails. Out of it, you get some information that you think, oh, wow, this is good. This can be successful. For a really long time, the makeup industry thought that they could only put out a small number of shades of makeup. So it was like 4 shades of foundation, like 4 shades of concealer. But the reality was that there is women from all colors, and they couldn't, 4 shades wasn't enough. They needed light to dark and everything in between. And so that's where Fenty Beauty, they're really good at doing this. They came up with their line of makeup, and they said, hey, that's, women need more than just 4 options. 3 is a process need, and that's something within your organization where there's a process that you think that there's inefficiencies, there's time being wasted, there's bottlenecks, and you add a little bit of value to make it more efficient. Industry and market structure changes. That's if, something in the market changes that changes your product. For example, in publishing, a lot of times, a couple of years ago, we were dependent on Facebook and social platforms for recirculation of our content. And when Facebook changed their algorithm to put publishing secondary to users, then we saw a huge drop in how much content we were getting to our users. And so that's one example. The last 3 here are things that are external. They're things that you don't have control over. They're things that are happening in the world. And you have to kind of think a little bit more thoughtfully about how to adapt to them. So that's an aging population, the baby boomers, women growing in the workforce, changes in perception. That's so health and wellness is becoming bigger and bigger, and a lot of people are finding alternatives to cow's milk. So that's where oat milk and nut milk and almond milk came about. And then new knowledge is new innovation in the industry as it relates to science, as it relates to technology. That's cryptocurrency and blockchain, that kind of falls there. And the ones on the bottom have a lower reliability because they are, because you don't have that first party data. It's a little bit more of a process to see what works. It takes longer to adapt to. It's not proven. But it is the most exciting because your risk is more, so the reward is more. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Discmans, but Discmans were a thing. I had one, and before that, they were Walkmans with cassette players. So this is an example of a market change. They found that CDs were growing, and it wasn't just a niche market for audio enthusiasts, that it was actually this is coming to the mass market, and we need to figure out a product for this. So Discmans were actually created as a response to CDs. They built a product, and they did a market innovation to fulfill the growing CDs. I don't know if you guys know what this is, but stem cell research is a new knowledge innovation. Stem cells were used for bone marrow transplants traditionally, but they're now coming on the market, and people are using them for knee surgeries, and they're helping heal faster. This type of innovation is riskier. It's harder to prove. It's harder to get people on board. It's a little bit more ambiguous. It takes longer, but it's very, very exciting. This is a great example of one of those. We put Elizabeth Holmes on the cover of Forbes. So did Bloomberg, so did Fortune, so did Inc. She was really, really big at one point because she was doing a lot of work with new knowledge innovation through Theranos. She's a kind of an example of the risk of going with new knowledge innovation and going forward with it so adamantly without really having a proven concept. But everyone was on board and supported her because it is so exciting. It's something new that people want to be a part of. Okay, so now that we understand kind of the history of innovation and a framework, how does it apply to the media industry? What do all these companies have in common? They're all technology companies. And because they're all technology companies, they've transformed the media industry because everything is a technology company now. You have to change and adapt. When I graduated from college, I was working in broadcast news. And I was talking to the head of the station. It was an ABC affiliate news station. And I asked him, like, what's the future of news? And he said, news is a business. So if you want to be successful in this industry, you have to understand how we make money. And so I was like, good idea. And I went to grad school and I studied entrepreneurship. And I studied how people make money off of content. And now I'm realizing that content is the product. So I work at Forbes. Content is our product. We're only as good as our content. And what product does is we create mechanisms to deliver that content to our users. So media companies are becoming technology companies. The power of your content is limited by your ability to deliver it to your users intelligently. So that's how do you deliver it in a way that they want to read it and they will consume it and they'll keep coming back. And then we're platform based. So we have a front end website, but then we have platforms on the back end that manage our content and that help our writers and editors quickly write their stories. So we're building all of these platforms, and we're kind of the information center of the companies because we're listening and we're observing and we're innovating. And product owners are masters of their craft. On any given Forbes.com page, there are so many different stakeholders that give input. There's sales, there's marketing, there's advertising, there's editorial, there's legal, there's product, there's design. There's all these voices in the room, and product owner's job is to kind of cut through the noise and get to what are we trying to do and how is this going to help our user and ultimately benefit our business model. So some examples of innovation at Forbes that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to also connect it back to Peter Drucker's sources of innovation. So I'll talk about a process need innovation, an industry market structure innovation, and a new knowledge innovation that I worked on at Forbes. The first one is a process need. So it has a pretty good reliability that it's going to be successful, but it's not very exciting, and you'll see why. So the scenario is at Forbes and at most companies these days, we use Jira to create tickets that have pieces of work for our engineers. And because we have so many stakeholders that need to see all of these changes and improvements and features, we have many tickets that go out every week, and all the stakeholders have to sign off on them. Sounds pretty like straightforward and pretty kind of boring and not that exciting, but it's a huge problem because it takes us 5 hours a week. I calculated and I talked to the people that are doing this, our QA team. It takes product owners, QA, and stakeholders 5 hours a week to do this process. So there has to be a better way. We needed the stakeholders to see all the tickets and approve or deny or reject them. And human error was causing us to actually miss tickets. And so it was causing the wrong things to go out, causing people to get angry, and it was causing a lot of missed work. So we utilized the Jira platform and we created a reoccurring email that just had all the tickets. It was automated. It wasn't manual. We also added a plugin into the Jira platform that would just allow them to quickly approve and deny the tickets without any extra work. And it saved us 5 hours a week. So it's like it's an example of a not very exciting innovation, but it is an innovation. And it did add a lot of value because the time that was taking all of us to do this process, we could have been, focused on building a feature or doing user studying or, talking about what we really want to do next quarter. And so time is really important, especially in a lean company. The next one is industry market structure innovation, and that has decent reliability, and it's a little exciting. So like I said, our product is content. And we're kind of dependent on the way industry allows us to monetize and distribute our content. And so there's from advertise-based models to digital subscription. So if you guys go to any kind of news site, New York Times, Digiday, any of those, you'll see that they have a meter at the bottom of the page that will say, like, you have 0 articles out of 6 left, please subscribe. So we had to rethink how we were monetizing our content. We had an over-dependency on Google. Google Chrome also has banned a lot of the third-party cookies that we are allowed to track. And so from an advertising perspective, we can't give the same information to our advertisers anymore who have their ad banners on our page. And then there's also just like with the fake news kind of fodder these days, there's a real demand for quality news, quality content that people can trust, that they know is reliable. So with this, we decided to establish a content strategy that was focused on audience. And so we're still in the process of doing this, but some of the things that we're talking about that we're seeing in the industry are individualization, which is something that Netflix does really well, and personalization, information as a service. So we're Forbes, we have 101 years of data. We have 101 years of information. Why don't we package that and grow that and sell that to CMOs or to people who are executives at their companies? To create a habit of news, which is like, I know every day at 2 p.m. on Thursday, there's going to be a story about a CEO at a startup company. And then site optimization, which is just faster site, lower page load, just improve the experience overall. The last source of innovation I'll talk about is new knowledge. And new knowledge is the most exciting. It has a low reliability of success, but it is super exciting. And it's what every CEO talks about when they do a talk. It's what all the journalists write about when the CEO does a talk. And mostly right now in the industry, it's revolved around AI and machine learning, not only in publishing, in a lot of different industries. And so at Forbes, we actually built our own content management system, and we've created an AI component that we're continuing to develop. And so this is kind of allowing us to create an assistant for our writers so they can focus on researching, and they can focus on the story and not so much how to write it and how to make it visible to the mass audience. And so this is innovation that's taking a long time. We just started developing it, but there's a lot that we don't know and a lot that we're learning along the way. But ultimately, it's going to allow for higher output for our writers, and it's going to allow us to kind of keep abreast with the competition because a lot of other publishers are doing this as well. So we talked a lot about how to innovate and what innovation is, but what happens if you have blockers to innovation? What happens if you're an organization that doesn't support innovation? There was a survey done by Harvard Business Review, and there's a number of different responses as to what's the biggest obstacle in a large company. These are by 270 corporate leaders. There's like politics and cultural issues, inability to act on critical developments, lack of budget, lack of strategy or vision. And really, ultimately, what that is this is an organization that doesn't put innovation as a core value. And so it's really important that when you have a vision or a mission statement, that innovation is represented there. That's represented there by your direct manager, but also at the top. I love this story, so I'll try not to talk about it too long. But this is a Ford Model T. And so a great story about someone who tried to innovate but failed was at Ford. So Henry Ford, known as like the greatest inventor, he created modern cars and the whole idea of traveling from one place to another. He had an executive that realized that they have the Model T, but all of their competitors are building a 6-cylinder car, and they don't have a 6-cylinder car. So they were actually losing market share, and their value of their brand was diminishing. So this guy, Ernest Kensler, he wrote a letter pleading with Ford saying, I know you're probably going to fire me because you don't like to be kind of like questioned, but I know that we need to put out a car that's intermediary between the Model X that they were taking years and years to develop. So he's like, I know we have to do this. If we don't put out a car with a 6-cylinder engine, we will fail. We'll lose our customers. And Ford basically didn't listen to him, ignored him, and eventually the guy left. But a year later, or less than a year later, they did put out that intermediary car. So it's an example of a company that you would expect to be innovative and you expect to have an open door policy on ideas and questions, but it wasn't. And if you identify an organization that you're at or a partner that you're working with that kind of cannot be questioned, then that's a good sign that, there's like a red flag. You should probably, question whether it's the right fit. Marty Kagan is a great thought leader in product as well, and he has some techniques for combating innovation blockers, and they all basically are around like taking it into your own hands. And so the 20% rule, this is really popular with Google engineers. It's 20% of their time can be devoted to whatever they want to work on. Skunkworks is you really want to work on something, but you work on it on your own time and to kind of develop a proof of concept. And then you take it and you show, your manager or your team leads, and you kind of say, hey, look, this is something we should do, and this is why. Observation, kind of self-explanatory. Experience design, that's like, what would the product look like if you had no constraints on technology or budget? And that kind of is like the spark for creativity. And then the last one is acquisition. A lot of companies are doing this. Like Goldman Sachs is a technology company now. But if you look at the acquisitions they've been making, it's all fintech companies because they realize that's the type of innovation that they need to be doing. But instead of trying to build it or figuring it out on their own, why don't we acquire some companies and do it that way? So recap, innovation is a process, not an outcome. You can be tapping into the 7 sources of innovation every day. You should read, ask questions, and observe. It's really an active role that you can play. And innovation is powerful, even if it's not always exciting. And it can be powerful, even if it's really, really small, a little small change. And product thinking is needed in every company, even when the product is content.